LinkedIn bidding a farewell to China after discontinuing its China app in Korea. But what led to this decision? You will get a job in the Chinese government one day. That's what prosecutors say the mom of a U.S. sailor said to encourage her son to deliver military secrets to China. Now he is facing multiple federal charges linked to espionage. More bans on U.S. investments in China, new restrictions targeting 3 Chinese sectors. Chinese economic woes continue with another concern, deflation. Why is this a problem, and what does it mean for the Chinese economy? What do you think? Let us know below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. LinkedIn's Chinese app is saying goodbye. In Korea, shut down in China earlier today. The U.S.-based social media network has struggled to grab a foothold in China. In Korea, telling users 3 months ago it will be discontinuing the service due to fierce competition and a challenging macroeconomic climate. But LinkedIn will still have a presence in China. That's through assisting Chinese companies to build their international brands and services in foreign markets. But how China uses the service has made headlines. Western intelligence officials telling the New York Times that Chinese agents make use of the app to recruit spies for China, including former government officials. Adding these officials are often more vulnerable as they're seeking employment. The report notes an agent will make various offers, including a paid speaking gig inside China as a means to develop the relationship. John Mills, retired U.S. Army colonel and former director of cybersecurity at the Pentagon, warns about leaving what's known as digital fingerprints.
They will know your interests, your behavior, your geolocation, and they will start regurgitating back to you to shape your behavior.
The U.S. top spy catcher telling Reuters LinkedIn has become the Chinese regime's go-to tool for recruiting spies, calling it a super aggressive campaign to recruit Americans on LinkedIn. The company has butted heads with China's internet regulatory body over the years. A New York Times article in 2021 noted LinkedIn refused to control political content. Chinese officials then required the company to perform a self-evaluation and suspended the company's ability to sign up new users in China for a month. In a 2022 transparency report, LinkedIn noted it got 43 requests from the Chinese regime to remove content. It complied with all but one. LinkedIn gave no explanation to why one request from Beijing stayed unresolved. A follow-up on the U.S. Navy sailor charged with providing sensitive military information to the CCP to get a job with the Chinese government one day. That's what a mother said to encourage her son to sell out confidential military secrets to China. That's according to a U.S. prosecutor who made the accusation towards the mother at a federal court hearing Tuesday, alerting the judge not to release the arrested soldier, Jing Chaowei. The 22-year-old is one of the 2 U.S. Navy sailors arrested in suspicion of spying for Beijing. Currently, they are facing an espionage charge, which includes collecting and delivering information to aid foreign regimes. It also includes helping Beijing access information of U.S. Navy wartime exercises and critical technical material. Both of them pled not guilty. Wei was born in mainland China. As a green card holder, he was eligible to join the U.S. Army. The Chinese Communist regime's efforts of spying on its biggest rival, the United States, are rising. However, a U.S. immigration program might open the gate for foreign intelligence agents. A U.S. visa program known as EB-5 requires a minimum foreign investment of $800,000 US. Even though China might have seized a loophole of sending its trained spies to the U.S., American lawmakers still reauthorized the EB-5 for the next 5 years. The program has brought Washington more than $40 billion since its establishment in the 1990s. A fresh wave of U.S. investment bans aimed at China is in the works. The new restrictions are designed to safeguard valuable American knowledge and money from flowing to 3 key Chinese sectors. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
President Biden on Wednesday signed an executive order to ban certain U.S. investments in Chinese artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and semiconductors. Biden writes in the executive order that such sensitive technologies can be used for the military, intelligence, and surveillance by countries of concern, which constitutes, quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. Biden adds that certain U.S. investments risk exacerbating this threat, and he thereby declares a national emergency to deal with this threat. The latest move comes amid growing bipartisan concerns over threats from the Chinese Communist regime. The Biden administration last year restricted exports of advanced chips to China, and he stressed today,
America invented these chips. You all know semiconductors are those little small computer chips about the size of any of a fingertip that affect nearly everything in our lives, from cell phones to automobiles, refrigerators, to the most sophisticated weapon system.
Meanwhile, the administration has stressed for months that any restrictions placed on U.S. investments in China will be narrowly tailored.
These are tailored measures. They are not, as Beijing says, a technology blockade.
But some experts say it's necessary to further counter China.
So these so-called targeted sanctions and targeted restrictions really aren't very effective. There's probably $2.3 trillion or more of money that's been invested in China. It's just too much money going into the wrong hands.
The new restrictions are expected to go into effect next year. Reporting from White House, Iris Howe, NTD News.
Universities and nonprofits across the U.S. may face a tough choice in the future. Last week, House China Committee Chairman Mike Gallagher introduced a new bill called the Ditch Act. It would require U.S. tax-exempt entities to divest from Chinese companies. Otherwise, they risk losing their tax-exempt status. Gallagher said, quote, institutions that want preferential tax treatment must choose. Are they committed to their professed values or of financing a genocidal communist regime? The bill's main goal is to prevent American taxpayers' money from inadvertently aiding the CCP and finance what Gallagher calls the techno-totalitarian state. Under the bill, taxable funds like foundation grants are allowed into China, but foundations cannot possess Chinese stocks and bonds. Tax-free funds like university endowments and public pension plans are not allowed into China. A waiver can be granted if an organization's need to keep a specific Chinese investment is more important than the potential risks to national security. While the rest of the world is grappling with inflation, China is dealing with another concern, its falling prices. As the country is struggling to get demand going again, it looks like it's sliding into deflation. China's consumer prices fell in July for the first time in more than 2 years, with the price of goods leaving the factory also in decline. What does this mean for the Chinese economy? Here are the details.
The National Bureau of Statistics said Wednesday that the Consumer Price Index dropped 0.3% year-on-year in July. It was the first decline since February 2 years ago. The Producer Price Index also fell for a 10th consecutive month, down 4.4% and faster than forecast. Markets are worried China has entered an era of much slower economic growth similar to Japan's lost decades. That saw consumer prices and wages stagnate for a generation. China's post-health crisis recovery has slowed after a quick start in the first quarter. Demand at home and abroad weakened and policies to support the economy failed to shore up activity. The data comes a day after the trade figures showed exports and imports both slumped in July. For now, authorities are downplaying concerns about deflation. Last month, the central bank said there would be no deflationary risks in China in the second half of the year, though it did say the economy needs time to return to normal after the health crisis. Now there is pressure on Beijing to release more direct policy stimulus, as the stock market is mostly underwhelmed by the lack of firm action. Policymakers have recently announced measures to boost sales of cars and appliances. But some market participants say stronger stimulus is needed. Investors have waited for policymakers to inject stimulus after last month's Politburo meeting.
The Chinese regime rolling out new regulations targeting cyber companies operating in the country. The CCP's information ministry is requiring all app providers to file business details with the regime. All apps with users on Chinese soil will have to finish filing the documents before next April. Otherwise, they may face legal punishments and fines. The new regulation sparked complaints. The operator of an online video platform told Radio Free Asia that she believes Beijing's recent move is to expand its censorship. And it's not only affecting Chinese businesses. The order is also likely to change the rules for foreign developers. According to an app publisher, instead of simply publishing their products on Apple's App Store, foreign developers will need to have a company in China or work with a Chinese publisher. And this is not the only regulation the CCP is rolling out for cyber companies. Last week, China's cyberspace regulator announced that service providers who hold more than 1 million users' data must undergo annual audits before supplying data overseas. Chinese propaganda on the streets of London, sparking a silent protest. Overnight, the tourist site was painted with big red Chinese characters, preaching political slogans of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. But soon, competing scribbles started to appear, criticizing the Chinese Communist Party ideology. Here's more from Brick Lane in London.
Brick Lane here in East London is known for its street art, but the street art that was originally on the wall behind me has been painted over on Saturday with a Chinese socialist message, and it sparked counter-graffiti. As you can see from these images on social media, the wall was whitewashed and stenciled with 24 characters, political slogans used by the Chinese Communist Party to promote the so-called core socialist values. Words that brought back bad memories for a Chinese student who goes by the name Apple.
They almost put it everywhere on the street in China. It's almost like a brainwashing, and then everyone has to remember those phrases when they were in primary school. That's why we're here today, to respond to that, to put out our graffiti art.
She said they're contacting the artists whose work was originally on the wall to see if their artwork can be recovered. Jake, a local in the area and who used to live in Beijing, said he was shocked to see the wall painted over.
This was a tribute to a graffiti artist who died, and so it meant a lot to people. So for the people to come and paint over everything is really bad. But then it's an interesting thing about graffiti because it's temporary. Someone's going to come and paint over it. I'm shocked that it happened so close to where I live.
On social media, a student posted images of himself and friends painting the wall. In it, he says, "For me, this work doesn't have much of a political connotation." The BBC reported the students appear to have been issued with an £800 fine for graffiti and fly posting. Soon after the slogans were put up, new graffiti appeared, countering the message. People added words to what originally said fairness and justice, so it read no fairness, no justice, and so on. Some commented it became a canvas of anti-CCP dissent. Exiled Chinese author Ma Jian told us his first reaction when he saw the 24 characters on the wall.
These young students don't know the history of the Chinese Communist Party because since 1949, violent revolution, the opposite of civility, has been the values taught in China. So children who grew up in that environment, as well as their parents and grandparents, all these generations grew up holding the opposite values as we do today.
Human rights campaigners said they stood in support of the dissenting graffiti, with Benedict Rogers saying, "I wholeheartedly applaud, support and stand in solidarity with the brave mainland Chinese who stood up against this and responded with counter-graffiti in Brick Lane." Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Top U.S. officials met with a Chinese envoy in Saudi Arabia during a summit about ending the war in Ukraine. The U.S. State Department called Beijing's presence at the meeting productive.
We have long said that it would be productive for China to play a role in ending the war in Ukraine if it was willing to play a role that respected Ukraine's territorial integrity and Ukraine's sovereignty.
The summit was held over the weekend in the Saudi Arabian port of Jeddah. It aimed to draft key principles for ending the war in Ukraine. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland attended. They had a brief meeting with China's Special Envoy for Eurasian Affairs and former ambassador to Russia, Li Hui. The Chinese regime repeated its controversial proposals for a ceasefire. The The U.S. State Department didn't address the details of the meeting. The meeting came amid heightened tensions between the U.S. and the Chinese regime. Just over the weekend, the U.S. State Department criticized Beijing for attacking a Philippine ship in the South China Sea. That's followed by the Navy's recent response to Chinese and Russian warships approaching Alaska.
Another big story to look out for, U.S. taxpayers may get angry. Public records show their tax money may be going to an illegal Chinese biolab with over 20 infectious agents inside, operated and hidden in California. That report and more coming up tomorrow on China in Focus. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Struggling to revive demand, China's economy is teetering on the edge of deflation. Its consumer prices fell in July for the first time in more than 2 years. And factory gate prices are also in extended decline. Why is deflation a problem? And what does this mean for China's economy? We sat down with Anders Kaur, a geopolitical expert and publisher of the Journal of Political Risk, for details. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.